Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, another great show. Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities. I am John Brackett, your host, and I have another amazing guest on the show. Today, I'm going to introduce you to somebody who is in the Hollywood circuit, writing, doing some really cool stuff, but more importantly, he's investing, which is why he's on the show. So as everybody knows, our purpose is learning how to strategically find and reposition, an average apartment building to an amazing community. And that's what our show is all about. Mark is someone that's been doing this for quite some time. Also has some really cool stories, which I'm gonna pull out of him. And Mark, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Really appreciate you being here. So I'm gonna invite our audience to this conversation by first sharing with them your background. Okay, sure. And then we're gonna get into some questions and just have a conversation. So Mark Hentemann is an Emmy-nominated writer-producer and original writer on Family Guy. He also built a $90 million multifamily portfolio in Los Angeles and Texas, which we're gonna get into and talk about. And so one of the cool things I like is, Mark talks about him struggling as a starving artist, and he used his first script payments in 2020 to buy a duplex in Los Angeles as a hedge against the uncertainties in the entertainment career, which, is, I really love that story. I love that concept. Real estate became a passionate side hustle for Mark, who founded Quantum Capital, which invests and syndicates value-added multi-properties in major cities. He also hosts the Wild West Real Estate Podcast. Mark also continues to write, produce, and do voices on Family Guy. Okay, he creates shows for Fox, MTV. He's written for David Letterman and worked on TED movies, and is currently writing a reboot of The Naked Gun. Oh, very cool, very cool. So Mark, welcome to the show. Very excited to have you on, and man, can't wait to get into this.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be on the show.
So if I missed anything in that introduction, please elaborate where you felt I may have missed.
No, that's more than you needed.
All right. Awesome, man. Awesome. So Mark, I love you making the comment that when you first started out, you took one of your very first checks and decided to make an investment in real estate, right? And then from there, you scaled from there to now, owning and operating roughly a $90 million apartment portfolio. So talk a little bit about that. I think that's a great launching pad to really invite our audience into this conversation and help give them perspective as to why you value real estate so much, specifically multifamily real estate.
Yeah. And, I haven't really thought about it that much, but I think the reason I, took the first dollars I ever made in the entertainment business is because looking backwards, I grew up in Ohio and I knew I wanted to be a writer. That was my passion. And what I did was I moved up to New York after college and got an unpaid internship. And so I moved up to the most expensive city in the world and have no income. I had a little bit like a trickle of income, but I'm pursuing this dream, and it became traumatic to me because I was that starving artist, and I know it gets romanticized, but there was nothing romantic about being in this extremely expensive market, having no income, watching my bank account go down, and I knew the number between where I was and when I was going to be homeless. And
that's incredible.
I was bolting awake in the middle of the night, just panicked over how I was going to pay my rent. And I think that kind of scarred me in a way that when I got out to LA, I ultimately got a job on Letterman and worked on Letterman, and then moved out to LA and hooked up with a new show at the time called Family Guy. And, with my first script payments from that, I was now in another very expensive city, Los Angeles.
Right.
And I was convinced that the entertainment business would be very volatile, that I would be, encounter spells of unemployment. And so when I got my first couple script payments on Family Guy, I, not directly, but, I indirectly got into real estate because I walked into a open house and a broker there suggested that, I see you've got like $45,000 saved up. You should be putting that towards a mortgage and stop wasting it on rent. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like I'm going to be out of work, any day now.
That's classic, man.
And I could be out of work for the next 6 months to 2 years. I don't want the responsibility of a mortgage, but she was persuasive and she was smart, and I'm grateful for that because she convinced me. She's like, this could be a good thing for you. But I emphasized to her that you can't find me any cute houses or show me any cute houses. I want something rough around the edges. I want an investment. This has to be a foundation that will help me weather this industry and provide me a kind of financial cushion. And to her credit, she got me into a duplex that was really rough around the edges and had a lot of value add to it. And I did all of that. And I had no idea what I was doing going in. And, I was panicked at the time thinking I had made a huge mistake, but, I got to experience the coastal real estate, phenomenon. And I bought it for $435,000 and sold for $1.27 million after 5 years.
That's a pretty good return, huh?
Yeah, it was. And I put down $43,000. I did the 10%. I didn't know about the FHA loan option as a first-time buyer that I could have done. But my $43,000 turned into about $830,000. So it was about a 2,000% return. And, the huge revelation that I experienced was, writing had always been my dream. And at that moment, I knew real estate was my must.
Oh man, I like that. Repeat that, because there's a nugget in that, right? There's a nugget. It's one thing, we all have passions. And one of the reasons why I got into this business, in fact, I was a commercial banker for many years. I used to underwrite commercial real estate, right? Finance commercial real estate. And so it's given me a huge advantage, I think, in this business. But,
Sure.
Same thing happened to me, right? I mean, I like banking, but I recognize that for me, it was a bridge to doing what I absolutely love, which is real estate. But we all have passions. And this business, I think, is a tremendous opportunity to be able to live out our passions, because we're not trading our time for money, right? We're deploying capital and to free up our time to be able to do the things that we love. So I really like how you said that. I think that's a great way to express how this business can be so valuable, why there's so much leverage in this business.
Yeah. And I wasn't one of those people, and there's a lot of them that are looking, I can't wait to quit my job and retire at age 30 with real estate. That thought never crossed my mind. I always wanted to write. I was passionate about doing this, but I just recognized the power of what I had experienced in real estate, the leverage, the tax benefits. And I loved the idea of, I buy this asset will pay me every month and also grow in value. And when I die, it'll get passed on to my children, at a almost tax-free. I guess all they get is a stepped up tax basis. So it was too good not to be doing this. And so, I wanted to continue writing, and I have. I mean, that was 20 years ago, and I've never sort of thought of quitting writing. I enjoy it. I love it. It's exhilarating to me, but it's also made me, I don't think this is delusional, but I think it's made me a better writer because the pressure is off. I know that everything is, my financial picture is taken care of. And so I could enjoy the writing aspect and do projects that I want to, or not do them, and even do writing or not.
Yeah. Mark, I think that's a great point, right? When you're in a position where you're not you don't feel forced to do something you don't want to do, or at least you have the the option to make decisions around what you would like to do, I think it really puts you in a different mindset, right? And it helps bring out the best qualities in you, because you're not in a position where you're being driven to make decisions that don't align with who you are as a person and your values, right? I think that's a great position to be in, and you're able to live out your true talents.
Yes. And I know a lot of people that, and we all know people who they had this passion when they were young, and then they got into this career and it turned into a job, and it was a 60-hour-a-week job. And suddenly they can't remember what they loved about it or why they got into it. And
right.
And I think when, I feel like there are certainly challenges to juggling a writing career and juggling, a multifamily portfolio that's now bigger than I ever thought I would have. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of attention that needs to go to both sides, and it's a lot to juggle. But I do like shifting gears, and I always evaluate, like, should I drop either one of these? And the answer has always been no. I don't want to. I get so much energy and fun and joy out of the writing, and I'm still passionate about it. And, real estate is absolutely not. I'm never going to quit that, because that's my whole future and my legacy.
Awesome, man. So I'm gonna walk our audience now through. We talked a little bit about the why behind the decision. Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to walk our audience through this cycle. Okay. This cycle that we have in this business. So inside of our business, we break this down when we talk about strategy and tactics inside of real estate in general, but also I think specifically, multifamily real estate, the cycle is the same. Okay. So we break that cycle down into 4 categories, or buckets, if you will, right? There's the acquisition side of this. There's the financing side, right? There's the management component. And then lastly, at some point we dispose of the asset, right? Ideally recognize a gain and defer that into something that's better, if you will, right? Now, you talked a little bit about the acquisition. So let's walk our audience through that initial purchase, right? Because we're going to talk them through this cycle with your experiences, okay, which you can appreciate because you're a writer. So we're literally going to talk them through this cycle, okay? And then we're going to pivot with that gain, and then how you parlay that gain into scaling to a $90 million portfolio, which has now given you the freedoms to do the things that you absolutely love, but you're probably starting to do that, right, when you made that $800,000 gain. So we talked about the acquisition. So tell the story of, when you were thinking through that first purchase, talk a little bit about, how did you analyze that deal, and what did the numbers look like? What made you move forward based on, how you approached that deal at that time, right? Because it was your very first one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes. The way I approached that first deal was different than any purchase that I've approached since then. That first deal, like I mentioned, started with me walking into an open house. And after I had visited an apartment that I was considering to switch apartments to, and this broker said, you should be putting your money towards a mortgage. And I said, if you find me a great investment and something that will give me that financial stability that I am desperate for, I will listen to you, and I'll invest in real estate. And so other than that, I knew nothing. I showed up. So what happened is she called me a couple weeks after we met at this open house. I figured I'd never see her again, but she did call me and she said, I found the property you need to buy, but there's a catch. You need to become a landlord. And I was like, a landlord? Like, I don't want to be a landlord. But I met her at the property, and I saw that it was rough around the edges, and it needed a lot of TLC. The sellers were raising goats and chickens in the backyard in the middle of Los Angeles.
Incredible.
And they were moving to Kansas to live off it, dig a hole and live off the grid in an underground dwelling. So there was a ton of work to do at this thing, but I knew that it was well located. I knew enough. I didn't know much at the time, but I could recognize a neighborhood on the rise when I saw one.
Right.
And this was a very hip neighborhood. It was adjacent to some very further along, up and coming neighborhoods. So I knew the area was good. The bones of this looked good. I knew that I could make it look a lot better cosmetically. And so other than that, I asked her, I said, I don't know anything about pricing. They're asking $379,000 for this thing. I don't know. Is this a good deal or not? And she's like, I think it's a good deal. And, I'm always grateful to this broker because she could have taken me to the cleaners, but she gave me good advice, sound advice. Right. And we offered $350 as a starting price, and it was LA. So there was, I think 15 other buyers, and the price was going up every day dramatically. And as I think I mentioned, I won the bidding war, outbid like 15 other buyers by paying $435,000 for this thing that was listed at $379, I think it was. And I thought I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. So that was my calculations on purchase, which was the worst, the worst way to go into something probably.
So I'm going to make a couple of observations. Okay. I'm going to share a couple of observations with our audience. Okay. And get your feedback. So Mark, you mentioned that you outbid 15 other people in this. Now, my guess is 70% of those offers, okay, were likely folks that were looking to purchase this property, improve it, and then resell it for a profit. Someone looking to flip, right? Now you held this property for how long? About 5 years?
5 years, yes.
Okay, beautiful. So do you think that, if someone outbid you on this property, right? They purchased it, they improved it, they turned it around in 4 months, that they would have realized the $800,000 gain that you did?
No, definitely not. Because, and by the way, when I closed, I was convinced that I had missed the upswing in the market, because I know I had only been out in LA for like a year and a half, but everybody I met and every time I went out to dinner with some, new friends, someone in the group was talking about how much money they had made off of some property that they had just bought. And it was usually houses, whatever,
Sure.
I was at the age when everyone was kind of buying their first houses. And I was like, oh my God, I just overpaid on this duplex and I missed the upswing in the market. So, here we come, brace ourselves for the downturn.
Classic, man.
But, it was 2005 it was 2000 when I bought, and we obviously had a good amount of time left in that upswing.
Awesome. So I'm gonna elaborate on that. So one of the reasons why I was asking the question the way that I did about you being able to realize this gain because you held it for a longer period of time, right? I see this quite a bit. I think oftentimes when people are looking to invest in real estate, there's the upside gets undervalued because of the urgency to want to come in and then get out, right? And I think a lot of that is sensationalized by the movies that we see, several of which you probably have written, what we see online, right? What we see on TV rather. But the point there being is there's a lot of value when you buy right, okay, and then you manage that opportunity forward, okay, which you did. Now, you may have not come into that with the perspective that you have now because of the experiences that you have. But one of the big takeaways that I got out of your comments was, hey, I bought in a really good location. Okay, I got it at a good price, right? I had a longer term perspective because I wanted to live in this thing for quite some time, and I was able to improve it as I lived in it. And then finally, I sold out at what I thought was a good exit price. Now let's talk about you taking that gain and how you started reinvesting that to build the $90 million portfolio that you have now, the $90 million portfolio that you have today, right? So so you have a very unique perspective now, because now you're a lot more experienced, a lot more seasoned. So let's start with, what do you look for today, right? What is your criteria today? What are you looking for when you invest? What is the criteria now?
Yes, and it did change from that first one. That first one, I was just reacting to everything. It wasn't very calculated, but I did do a couple things. I think the smartest thing I did, and I don't think I've ever mentioned this on a podcast or anything, I think the smartest thing I did on that duplex was I decided that, our side of the duplex was clearly the owner's unit, and the next door was, although they were equal in size and very similar, you could tell where whoever I was going to sell it to, they were going to live in our side. So we went high end with the kitchen, and we went with high end appliances, and we made it look great. And in that was the most transformed aspect of that whole property, other than like changing the goats and the chickens farm in the backyard to something landscaped with like a fountain and stuff. But, I think that's why someone came in and was willing to pay $1.27 million, because we got an emotional buyer. Someone wanted to live there, and They were to pay a high, premium pricing. So anyway, to answer your question, today I've evolved. Even while I still own that original, I was starting to hone a pretty specific strategy that I liked in the LA market. And you probably experienced this in San Francisco. I think people in or down in San Diego, people in San Francisco similarly experience this, but the rest of the country can't seem to wrap their head around the strategy that I use, which I buy old buildings. I buy 1920s, I buy 1930s. I like that product, and I could pick them up at, what I target is about a $250 a square foot price. And I've gotten as low as like $190 a square foot, which is unheard of. They're usually distressed. Sometimes sellers are suing each other, and there's other hair on the deals. But I, coming from Ohio and not having a lot of resources, I just sort of by default got into, if I'm going to be in multifamily, I got to buy cheap buildings because I'm in a very expensive market.
Right.
But what happened is I started liking, like, if I'm buying $250 a square foot, the cost of replacement or the cost to build is around $500 a square foot when you factor in, the permitting and the land and all that. And I really liked, I'm kind of conservative, and I really liked buying it at half of market. That allows me to weather any downturns, weather any economic volatility, and then also not have to price it too high when I'm on my exit. And I even going in, I say, all right, I'm going to buy it at $250 a square foot and try to sell it at $475 a square foot.
Sure.
I don't want to have to sell at an outrageous price in order for me to make a profit. I want to be able to make a fantastic profit and still sell it at, a median price based on the market.
Okay, good. So you're in LA and you're in Texas predominantly, right? So
yes.
The LA market is very different than
yes.
And it sounds like you're in Austin.
Yep.
Okay. And so, that metric of buying older buildings in the 1920s, 1930s, downtown or in LA, I can understand that. LA is a market that's been around for quite some time, right? A lot of older product there.
Yep.
So how does that strategy then shift when you're in a market like Austin?
It does shift. I have a different strategy in Austin, and I have a partner who's based in Austin, and I'd been building a multifamily portfolio. I probably had reached like 22, 23 multifamily properties, maybe about 400 units in LA. And I knew that I started to think I should really diversify and get into a second market. And I spent 2 years, maybe more, 2.5 years, trying to identify what is the second best, or what is a market that I want in addition to LA. And I narrowed it down to Salt Lake City and Austin, Texas. And I really like Austin, Texas. It's got the population growth. It's got job growth. It's a big tech hub, a tech city. It's a university town. It's a state capital. And it's also has the most stringent building requirements in the state of Texas. So it has barriers to entry, and all those things were appealing to me. And I pulled the trigger on it. But yes, it did require a different strategy. And I've gotten in all we've bought 3 larger properties. Our largest is 83 units, and they're all garden style. And more of that's more of a management play. And I prefer the 1980s construction in Texas. I think we do best with that, with about that vintage, because it allows us to add value and kind of dramatically change those into, modern properties.
Sure. Okay, good. So I have a pretty good feel for the strategy and how that strategy diverges, right? How it changes in one market over the other. LA, you're looking at older product, 1920s, 1930s, right? Any of that historical, or is it predominantly non-historical product that's just undervalued and needs a lot of love that you can then bring up to current standard?
Yes, I always consider them historical, and that's what I look for. We just bought a building about maybe a year and a few months ago that looked like a castle. It looked like a French chateau / castle. It had a turret, and it was just in neglect. I mean, the lobby was this big, stone lobby, and it had like 1980s linoleum flooring. And what I like to do in LA is Hollywood,
right?
And so I love transforming those old buildings. I go in, I put like vintage 1920s tile. I like to transform those, the lobbies. Like, your first impression, Los Angeles has that opportunity, is every building has a lobby. And I put like vintage Hollywood photos, black and white, and, play up that historic character of those properties.
Sure. In LA, I can see that strategy working really well, right? Because, LA, Hollywood, just that eclectic vibe, right?
Exactly.
That unique vibe. That in that market, I can see, you attracting a very unique tenant willing to pay a higher price, premium, primarily just for the uniqueness of the product, right? Now, yes. in Austin, though, a little bit different. Okay, you're buying 1980s product, right?
Yep.
That's the vintage. And the logic behind that, the strategy behind that is, okay, John, the reason why we're buying this is because we have an opportunity to add more value to it, raise it up to current standard. And of course, with that, we feel we can attract a better quality, just a more unique demographic, right, for that product. And ideally, we get the premium in rents, through that as well. But now here's the thing, though. So Austin, a little bit more unique because you don't have the density that you do in LA. So what are some things that you really have to watch for? Like, one of the things that I really appreciate you saying, Mark, is, you're looking for markets with barriers to entry.
Yes.
So in LA, the barrier to entry is price, right?
Yep.
Not only price, but also all the code requirements.
Yeah, I had read somewhere that the 2 most difficult cities to build in the United States are Honolulu and Los Angeles.
Yes. So that's a big barrier to entry there, but also a great niche if you can master that. So what are the barriers in Austin?
I think the barriers in Austin, there's a lot of competition in Austin. I think there are regulations. It's the most regulated city in Texas, and it's probably going to be the first city in Texas to adopt rent control, if they do. And there's debate that maybe the Texas state legislature would veto any kind of rent control. But Austin already has restrictions. It's expensive. to build, and the land is expensive. But it's also, this is maybe an old stat, but it was something like 200 people a day were moving to the city of Austin, and maybe that's a 2-year-old stat that I'm throwing out, so I don't know how current it is, but it's rapidly growing. And Amazon and Google and Tesla are all building massive new facilities there. But your question, I think I'm drifting off your question.
No, it's good. Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, I have 3 properties there. One of them has a student population and like a tech professional population. And then one of them is a blend, and then one of them is more workforce.
Interesting.
And they're all the garden style. And they were all, like I said, management plays. They were all out-of-state owners. And I think that there's a big opportunity is I think over the last 10 years, Texas has been a darling market for the national for real estate investors nationally.
Right.
So you do have a lot of people buying that don't live there, that don't necessarily know the market. And my partner, we're on the ground there. We know the market really well. And we've been able to identify, we sift through a lot of deals and reject a lot of deals, either by the price that they're asking or the bidding. A lot of things get bid up, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to find those out-of-state owners who are maybe trying to manage it themselves and are doing it suboptimally. And we can incorporate RUBS, we can add bedrooms. There's a lot of stuff that we can do. We just have a kind of a list of our go-to, which is buy out or cancel the laundry contract. We try to add bedrooms where we can. We try to add units. We implement RUBS, and then just a series of small ways to add value, and then reduce expenses by being on top. The most common thing is you see owners that just don't stay on top of expenses.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. So you said something that really stood out, which is one of the first opportunities that you look for is canceling the laundry contract if you can, right? Typically, right, vendor leasing the equipment, right, sharing revenues, a split that's usually not very favorable.
No,
not at all. So I agree. I mean, if you're able to cancel that contract, that's a great opportunity. There's a property that we have right now that we're working through that. We're having a very difficult time doing that. Not because the contract that can't be canceled. Technically, the vendor doesn't have any rights anymore to the property, but they filed their a lien against it, right, to secure their lease. And man, they're just not getting back to us. They're not responding.
Oh my God.
It's like the convenience of not providing great service, right, when you actually have reported the leases. So very, very interesting. So
Right.
how do you cancel, what is your strategy for canceling a contract that's already in play? Because it can be very difficult with some of the vendors out there.
Yes. We try to buy them out. Usually it's something that we look for while we're in due diligence, before we've removed any contingencies and committed to it. And honestly, I don't think it's been a deal breaker on anything, but it's something we go right at, like when we're starting to receive all the due diligence items, is like, when can we cancel the laundry contract? And their contracts, as you've experienced, are comically slanted in their favor.
Unbelievably.
And they fight tooth and nail. We're in one right now on one of our Austin properties where we have the contract in front of them, and we keep saying, no, see, could you go to like item C12? This contract expires in November of 2020. And their response in an email is, no, it expired last year and we renewed it. And so our response is, no, we're looking at the contract. We have a copy of the contract in front of us.
Right.
And it goes back and forth and back and forth. And
what a waste of time.
They're not acknowledging, it's funny.
Yeah, well, it's funny and it isn't, right? It's funny in the sense that, we get to see how dysfunctional this industry can be. Okay. And it's not funny in that there's an operating cost to us as operators because of that.
Right.
But the other side of that too is, if everybody operated perfectly in this business, there would be no opportunity, right?
Yes.
And so because of the dysfunction, I like to call it.
Yeah, the inefficiencies.
It creates a huge advantage for operators who are willing to work and put more effort in to create that value and to create that opportunity where, you just have those kind of operating efficiencies, because this business is littered with them, as is, many of the other industries out there. But I think this one's unique because there's such a tie to people in this business, right?
Yes.
Almost.
You don't require any formal education. You don't require any designation. On Wall Street, venture capitalists who buy, companies, they're buying professionally operated companies.
Great point.
And we as value add real estate investors, we're basically venture capitalists. We want to go in, we're buying a business, there's no question about it, and we're looking to see if we could improve that business. But a huge advantage and opportunity that real estate investors have is that you're buying not off of professionally run businesses like they are in the corporate world. You're often buying off of a dentist or like a retired doctor or a mom and pop owner, right, that never looked at the efficiencies of it or never explored every avenue to optimize the operations of those properties. So it seems like there's a much bigger opportunity to find poorly run multifamily properties.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I really appreciate you sharing what you did, especially when you talked a little bit about the operation side of the business, right? So we walked our audience through an acquisition example, okay, how you financed it. Then we moved into some of the operational components and the operational opportunities. You pointed out, some of the top three in your case, right? You're looking for markets with good job growth, a diversified employment base, but also barriers to entry, and how you really you look for different ways to add value, right? You have a laundry list of opportunities that you look for. One of them being, inefficiencies in the operations with some of the contracts that vendors have in place. So great example. Mark, here's a question that I do have, because you've really, I think, provided some incredible examples, right? Is for someone listening at this point wanting to get into this business, okay, and let's use a busy professional as an example, right? Someone like you who already does something that they like, or maybe they don't like it as much, but they're getting paid really well and they've been in that industry for 10, 15 years, okay, and they're really good at what they do. They've developed a lot of expertise, but they also understand that, hey, I need to take this cash that I have and find a way to deploy it into something that's going to allow it to multiply, if not quicker, then at least into something that's going to generate, a better return for me than what I'm making right now. What would be your advice to them?
My advice would be, if they're young and if they're possibly single or possibly married without kids, what I did was, it wasn't called this back then. It was, I house hacked. I mean, I bought that duplex and lived in one side of it. And what comfort it brought to me on day one was that, yeah, if everything goes to hell in my writing career, I'll live in this. This is where I'll live, and I'll rent out the other side and I'll survive. And that turned out to be an amazing way to get into real estate, to learn real estate, and be hands-on. And I think if you're older or deeper into your career, maybe you've got kids and you are making good money and you want to take advantage of real estate, I think, it's a great sector. It's very stable. There's a saying, and I hope I don't butcher it, that that Wall Street has the best marketing and the worst returns, and real estate has the worst marketing and the best returns.
I love that, Mark. I love that, and I'm going to borrow that, man. The Wall Street machine has the best marketing and the worst returns, especially when you factor in all the fees.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
yes, hidden fees. You don't know. They've sold the country and the world on that they're low risk, that they're less risky than real estate. And I've been doing this 25 years. And I hate to say it, my brother is on Wall Street and he runs a hedge fund, and they do well, but there's no way that a piece of paper that you own on a stock that fluctuates wildly is more stable than a physical asset that provides housing.
Right.
It's just, you don't have to be a genius to recognize between those two things what's going to be more stable long term. 1 + 1 = 2, huh? Right.
Well, Mark, we're at the end of our show. Mark Hentemann, everybody, really appreciate you having you on the show, man. It's been a great time having this conversation with you, gaining your perspective, also some of your wisdom as well. And I look forward to personally reaching out, connecting with you on just various opportunities that we're involved in, and getting your perspective, especially in high density markets, right? Because that's what you're in. We're both in very similar markets. So I really appreciate that, Mark. So how do people get in touch with you, Mark?
Sure. You could reach out. You can check out our website, which is Quantum Capital. The name of my company is Quantum Capital, and our website is quantumcapitalinc.com. As you mentioned at the head of the show, I do a podcast called The Wild West Real Estate Show.
Right.
And, if you want, you could reach out to me. Just email me. My email is my full name, MarkHentemann @me.com.
Awesome. Well, I am your host, John Brackett. I'm going to summarize really quickly here with Mark Hentemann. So, inside of multifamily real estate, we have different opportunities to invest in different markets. In Mark's case, he's looking for older value-added properties between 1930, right, in high-density markets like LA, and then also in Texas, in markets like Austin, where there are barriers to entry, which I think is a very unique perspective, right? People often talk about markets, but they don't talk about the barriers that markets create that will create an advantage for you and I, right, as investor operators, as all of us, as investor operators, when we master how to overcome those barriers. So, man, I love that. I want to thank you for sharing that perspective. So, folks, we appreciate you joining the show, appreciate you participating and being involved in this conversation. I'm your host, John Brackett. I'm here with Mark Hentemann. Like us, share us up, go and give us a great rating so that we can continue to reach out and share, our perspective and our stories, to be able to find ways to positively influence the communities that we're in and improve how people live. So, hey, folks, John Brackett, thanks for joining, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.